in this video I'm going to be doing a service setup on this guitar, which is my Ibanez RG470. It's been with me since it's a 2000 model, so it's been with me for 21 years, and it's seen a lot of use. It was my only guitar for about 7 or 8 years. So yeah, I'm going to walk you through what I do to set these guys up. A few things before I start stripping this thing to pieces is the colour. Now this used to be dark blue, purple colour, and I thought, well, I got a bit bored with it, so I thought I quite like the natural wood coloured look of a few guitars, so I thought I'd strip it down. Ugh. So what I did, I got a heat gun to strip the paint off, and as I was doing it, because I had originally intended just to stain it a different colour, I was a big fan of the Crimson Guitars Stunning Stains set that they do, and I was going to do it kind of like a bit of a black colour, light black, so you can still see the wood underneath it. I started stripping it off, heat gun on it, and I could notice that I was burning it as I was doing it. I thought, shit. And so after a while I thought, actually, I quite like that effect. So I took it all off, and it ended up being burnt in some strategic places, so I actually burnt it on purpose in various points. You can sort of see what it looked like. The problem was, I won't necessarily recommend this, because this guitar is made out of 3 bits of wood that are sandwiched together, and on the joint lines where I was heating it up, it actually began to split because I was, it was drying it out, so the wood was shrinking, and so I basically had to submerge it in water and then leave it to dry to its like natural humidity level for about 2 weeks, and then everything came back to normal again. The only issue was the neck pocket width became ever so slightly wider than it used to be. Then that could have been because I took the paint off, or it could have been because it actually swelled, but whatever. The other thing was that I decided to customize all my control plates. So these are all made out of Zebrano, and I also did this one as well. Can't really see that. There we go. So just carbon copies of the originals using blocks of... You can buy worktop samples of wood from a particular company, I can't remember who it was, and they'll send you a relatively square piece of wood for like a £5, maybe £10, and I bought like 6 different versions: maple, Zebrano, some other woods that I can't remember the name of. And the other thing I will mention is that if anyone's watched my previous video on my rig and this guitar, things have changed slightly, specifically with the electronics. Now there's a few more switches, and there's no selector switch anymore. So how this works, so these two control whether the humbuckers are on or off. So down is on, up is off. That's the bridge, that's the neck. So effectively all that this guitar is that every pickup can be put on or off. That's the middle, on or off. And these ones are coil splits. So they're on, off, on types. So when they're in the middle, the humbuckers are just humbuckers. When it is up, it activates the outside coils only, and when it's down, it activates the inside coils. So you have pretty much every combination of a pickup in there. You can turn them all on, you can turn them all off, and then any combination in between. So right, let's strip this bitch down.
So what I will say with this is that don't treat this as a 1 year complete overhaul. So don't treat it like I do this on every single time I change a set of strings. This is a proper check of everything on this guitar. So I'll check, I'll check the tuners. I will completely release the truss rod. I'll take the neck off. I will check the nut. I will check all the frets, that they're level and everything like that. And yeah, I will completely disassemble the Floyd Rose. Make sure everything on there is fine. So yeah, don't think that this is what I do every time I change a set of strings. This is quite an intense piece of work.
Also, the other thing, because I'm taking all the strings off for a long time, I would loosen the truss rod off. If you're doing that, like, a lot of people will say on a Floyd Rose, just change one string at a time, which if you're putting the exact same strings on again, is usually fine. You can get away with it being practically how you set it up before in terms of the bridge level, because that's the main thing with a floating Floyd Rose. You want the bridge to be exactly parallel with the body. That's the key on that. So I will take all the strings off, loosen the truss rod off, and then the neck will just be a blank piece of wood, and then I will measure it for flatness when I go to start setting it up.
So here's the control cavity plates. It's the one for the tremolo, which obviously fits over here. So the main reason there's a hole there is because this trem block, which isn't the original, it's a titanium trem block, I bought it too long compared to the original, so it was too deep, and it protruded through the plastic one didn't fit on it. So with this one, I made sure that it was deep enough, thick enough, so that it matched the height of this trem block. So when I'm playing, my leg, whatever, isn't pressing this down. So it's flush with this plate. And then this is the truss rod run. So again, it's got a little camera's getting that little chamfered edge on there, and all it is just zebrano wood, which has been treated with a bit of just finishing oil from Crimson Guitars, just one coat, just to see that up a bit. Now when I loosen the strings, I'm not bothered about the Floyd Rose bottoming out, because it won't fall out or anything, it won't damage anything. So I would just loosen these strings off and allow the Floyd Rose to just completely hit the floor. Yeah, some people might want to just keep this flat, especially if you're not taking the control cavity plate off the back. You'll just, you might put a screwdriver under there, or a hard ruler or something, just to keep it flat. But I will just loosen these off. I just remembered why you want to maybe keep this flat sometimes, is because you'll obviously want to take these out, and if it's all the way back here, you cannot get an Allen key under there, hex key. So I mean, I will just stick this back in, and then when I want to take them off, I will just bring it flat, get a key in there, and then out they come. So now the strings are all off. This will come out, and now I want to loosen the truss rod. So as long as you got one of these special tools, which the guitar would usually come with it, loosen it off. It's annoying having to hold a camera doing this. You want to go that way, so loosen it off, and this is just to take the tension off the neck, so that the neck doesn't fight itself under no tension. So I'm just taking all the tension off that the truss rod gives it. So there you go, loose, and now the Floyd Rose should come off. Let's take that out. So to make sure the Floyd Rose comes out, you want to take these springs off off the trem block, which when there's no tension they just literally fall off. And you probably notice all this foam, which is from aftermarket Seymour Duncan pickups. And anyone with a trem guitar knows that there's a bit of resonance in those springs when you're playing. And if I just shove a load of this stuff in there, it dampens them up, so that works great. Right, now if I lift the guitar up, the Floyd Rose will remain. Now at this point, I'm going to take the neck off because I want to show you guys something that I did with my bolt-on neck guitars. So I'm just going to take these out. As you can see, these are Torx headed bolts, and I'll show you why. So these are the bolts that came out of the neck. As you can see, they're machine bolts, not wood screws, and they're stainless steel because in the neck I've put in stainless steel threaded inserts into there. Now it looks a bit of a shower of shit there for some reason. I think it's because I was sanding it off. But yeah, they are threaded inserts, which means that it's metal in metal. So you're threading it into metal, which means you get a much tighter connection. And also you don't, if you're someone like me who tinkers with guitars all the time, taking the neck out every 5 seconds, you don't want to compromise that wood screw joint, because over time the screws will just strip the wood out. And also it means I can torque these up to a specific torque, which isn't unscientific, but I like to do it because I'm a bit of a OCD. I've also just noticed it says RG470. This is a 470, not a 550, so they must use the same necks on that. And I don't know what that says at the end. 47, number 7, don't know. So at this point, I will clean the fretboard. So for this, I will be using, again, the Crimson Guitars fretboard and finish cleaner and fretboard restorative. Now I've been aware of Crimson for a long time, and they're based in Dorset, and so am I, so it's quite nice to have a local company that's doing good things. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are aware of who they are. If they're in the UK, hit them up and see what they do. So what I will do is that I will spray the fretboard with this stuff, and then what do you do with it? I can't remember. Yeah, so you just spray it on and wipe it in for a bit, and then you wipe the excess off, and then you'll see how much crud comes off of this. Now this hasn't been, you can kind of see sort of, it's not massively disgusting because I do this quite often, but depending where you play on the guitar, you'll see a lot of shit build up, especially under these frets, on the side of these frets. Come on. So yeah, once that's on there, you then put this restorative on there, and you leave that in. It's almost like an oil that you would finish a guitar in. Is you leave it on there for like 5 minutes, and then you would just buff it out when it's done, and I will show you the finished result. Now this is just the cleaner itself. Now I rubbed it in with my fingers, which is probably not the ideal thing to do, but it works pretty well. Now all that crud that you can see is the dirt that's come off the fretboard from me wiping it. All I've done is just sort of wiped it in like that, and all this crud comes off with it. So you can see it's actually quite a lot in there, even though you don't really notice it when you look at it straight away. It's definitely there. So while I'm here doing this, what I'll also do as part of the service for it is that I will just nip up every single screw just to make sure it's all there, and also these just to make sure they're all evenly loose or tight, however you like your tuners to be. And I'll also just tighten up these nuts as well, and also for the nut itself I have a rear tightening nut, so I'll just tighten them up. So that's all done. It's pretty clean now. It's gone a bit darker because the oil sort of just gives the oil, the oil makes the wood, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what it actually does, but it just makes it a bit darker. There you go, ready to go back on. So now I'll just give the body a quick clean. I use the same cleaner I did on the fretboard actually, because it works really well. So same deal with the neck. I'm just gonna all the bolts on here. So these pickup bolts, all these little nuts and stuff, jack plate, they will all get tightened up. It would also be at this point that if there was any wiring issues, that I'd have to go into this absolute abomination of wiring. I say abomination, it's not an abomination, it's actually quite complex and very handy. Maybe a bit messy in places. You try and go into that with a soldering iron and not cause a fucking riot. I went over with a notched straight edge, which measures the flatness of the fretboard itself, not the frets. And I did this in playing position, not as it is, because even gravity and these will cause a bit of a bend in the middle. So I did it up against me and adjusted the truss rod so that it was virtually flat. Oh, not virtually flat, completely flat. And then from there, again in playing position, I used a fret rocker to go along and measure all the frets. I mean, there's many videos about how to do this online, but you just measure if there's the middle fret, whether it's higher than the two beside it. And if there are any, then you either do a full level if there's more than sort of 6 across the whole fretboard, or you spot level a particular fret. I went across this and there was maybe 3 that rocked, so I don't personally feel that's worth bothering with, and they were all up here. So I know that none of my bends were choking out, the action was pretty low, so I don't really have to do anything about it. If you want to be super picky, of course you could spot level, but you know, it takes a while. So yeah, I'm gonna now disassemble the Floyd Rose. So when it comes to the Floyd Rose, the main thing to remember is just in the order of which things came apart in. So, I mean, most of the stuff is identical. Like there's just 6 of everything, so it shouldn't be too hard to remember. But because I'm going to be kind of resetting the intonation, I will keep a rough note of where all these screws went in, so I can see on this that they're all in the second hole, except that one which is in the first. So I'll show you how I take this apart. So first of all, I will take all these string locking blocks out, and all that is just you undo these and they'll come out, and I'll just keep them in the order that they came out in. So just undoing enough that they'll just kind of fall out. Yeah, and as they sit, that's the order they came out in. So keep those to one side. And then next is I'll physically take these screws out all the way. And again, I just keep them in the same order. So these fine tuners, they don't really come out. If you really needed to replace them, and you'd have to like almost strip the last thread off. Like no, you can get them out. So as you can see, but I don't need them to come out. It's actually the first time I've ever taken that out. So I'll just wind them all out. For no other reason than to satisfy my pickiness. And so the next bit is to take that bit off, which is where the actual tremolo arm goes. And it's just a little hex thing on the back. You just undo that. Now I know that this piece is worn out on mine, so I need to get a replacement for this. And this just pops out. So yeah, in there is worn out. I probably won't replace that for this video, but I'll do it in the future. And so now I will take the actual saddles out, which is not that Allen key. Yeah. So again, keeping them in the order. Again, you don't actually have to take these completely out. As you see, they're just falling apart. So that's that. And the last bit is to remove the trem block. Again, you don't really need to do this, but I like to. So these 3 screws. Just hold it together because it will just fall everywhere. So you're left with just the base plate itself, which you can just clean up, a spring claw, and just a shim. Not really sure why that's in there, because you could just bolt it straight to the base plate, but it's there, so I'll put it back. And this is my trem block. Sonics Floyd Rose titanium trem block. 42mm. So what I'll do now is clean them up. I will use a bit of IPA just to get the saddles, and a toothbrush, which, you know, every guitarist who does their own work should have, and clean them up. So yeah, toothbrush, got a little lid of IPA, and just dip it in, and then just clean the saddle up a bit. Just any kind of dirt and grime from your hands, getting all the little crevices. And then same with the plate itself. So I just use a microfiber just to rub over any excess IPA.
Right, so it's ready to go back together. So pretty much in the reverse order it came off. So this shim and this claw, which goes back together that way, so that the teeth or whatever are pointing down. And with the block, it doesn't matter which way the writing goes, but I like it to be inward facing. It's just a little bit fiddly to get all the holes lined up. So it's probably easier actually just to put the screws in first. Then the claw. So make sure that the claw looks like that. And then the shim. And like that. And then the block. You can't really see a lot here, but so as long as it's like in enough, you can just start tightening that up. It probably looks like I barely did anything in this whole effort here, but my Floyd Rose did have quite a lot of crap on it when you looked at it close up. Like, you're not going to expect it to look genuinely dirty. Those are all tight. They just need to be tight with an Allen key, not like super tight and not finger tight. So now I will put all the saddles back on. So the main thing with this is just to make sure that they're all straight. Because the important thing with these saddles, let's do it the other way so they won't fall off. With these saddles is that they're actually radiused themselves. So these are lower than these ones. And you'll see that, if you can pick that up, it's ever so slightly radiused. See, that's why you have to make sure you get them in the right place. Like my Ibanez is 17-degree radius, so it's very flat, but it's enough to need some sort of radius on the bridge. So make sure they're straight. And I'll just tighten these down. Well, they don't have to be super tight because obviously you'll probably have to take them off again to do the intonation, but it's good enough for there. So now put all these little string things back in. Just make sure the little hole in my camera does not pick this up. That little hole is facing that way, as in that way, and is at the very bottom. So that's those all back in. Now just to put the screws back in, and these go, don't want these all to fall out, goes between the top of the plate. Let's do this one first. So like that, goes between, because it uses a bit of spring for when the fine tuner does its job. So just finger tight those up.
just so they don't fall out again. And that's that. And then just finally to put the trem arm back in, so stick the top bit in first. Sometimes it can be a bit of a hard fit, but when you tighten this up it will jam itself in. So just make sure you get the little washer in as well. And make sure that's done up pretty tight. There we go. So that's that done. So back to the guitar again. I had taken the mounting studs out just for the purposes of it being, you know, a full setup. I would never do that normally, because why would you set the action again if you didn't need to? People could argue why I would do that this time, but you know, I just did. So I will put those mostly back in. Enough for the bridge to just mount in. And then I will put the bridge in temporarily, making sure they're in. You know, it kind of sits like that, it's not really in, but I'll flip the guitar over so that it looks like this from the back. So now I will put the springs back in. Actually, I'll put all the foam back in first because it's a pain in the ass otherwise. And the springs, so it ended up being like this. With the springs, the three closest ones going out like that. No particular reason for the setup. I've seen pictures of people do it like this. I've tried other ways, and this seems to just work for me. Focus is gone. Come on. There we go. Yeah, and I've put the foam underneath. So as long as it's touching all the springs, it should be good. Right, so once that's back in, put the trem arm back in and get it so it sits on the knife edges. And what you want to do is find something. Now I'm using my fret rocker because it's pretty solid and you ain't bending that for shit, and just a bit of tissue to protect the body, except there. Sorry, it's not touching. And to make sure that is flat to the body. And so what you want to do when you restring it is that you want to use the tension of the springs on the back to allow this to come back to being dead flat, like that. So when you take this away and then retune it to what this is going to be in E, it will be exactly flat with the body, and I'll show you how you do this. So you want to flip it over again, and on the claw you want to wind these all the way in. Now just remember, the only issue with this method, and the thing is I use it because I know it works for this guitar, is that when I go about setting the action, which I'll do in a minute when I put some strings on, is that if this then starts going too high or too low, this will be in the way, or it won't do anything. So what I usually do is, if I need to go lower, I'll use a thinner ruler. If I need to go higher, then I'll stick some, you know, like credit cards or bits of cardboard under there. Some stuff that won't compress too much. But let's see how we go. So I'll be using a set of these Only Ball Super Slinkies 9 through 42. So with this, you've obviously got ball end. Now I know some people actually put the ball end through the head, through the tuners, and I used to do that, but then I got locking tuners, so it's
pretty much irrelevant to do that, so I cut the ball end off and jam that in to the bridge. So set pliers, these are actually like bike cable cutters, but set pliers, cut the ball end off, and then what I do is open up the bridge. I'm doing the screw and making sure that it goes in dead center. And all the way down to the bottom, and then tighten it up. Get that really nice and tight. With the fatter strings you get a bit of compression so you can go a bit further than you think. And then feed it up to the tuner end. And because these are locking, I only want really about less than one revolution of the tuner. I can find the bloody hole on it. There we go. Again, one-handed camera where I need to sort this shit out. So I'll get enough through that the string's under, it's loose, but then I will tighten that up. And again, being a locking tuner, the internal mechanism locks. I mean, these are old, these are OG Grovers, so not like the ones with the thumb wheel on the back. These lock in here. There's a cam that locks it, so it doesn't do anything for ages. And then you see it starts to turn. So that's on. Now I'll do the high E. I just remembered again that because I loosened the truss rod, I can't set the action yet until all the strings are on. But judging by kind of where it sits at the moment, it's not actually a million miles away from where it's probably going to be, so I think this will be alright. So let me get all the rest of the strings on. Right, so the strings are all on. And what you want to do is just to stretch them out a little bit, just to take some of the slack out. It's not a final stretch, but just to take a bit out. So with locking tuners, this is a lot easier. But just pull them up a few times in various places, just to take that initial slack out of it. And then once it's back up to your desired tuning, which for this is standard E, we can then do the truss rod adjustment. What you want to make sure as well before you start tinkering around with any adjustments is to make sure that all of these fine tuners are in their middle position so that you get the maximum amount of adjustment either way. Because you can really mess yourself up if you leave one at the highest point and you have nowhere to go and you got to set up the whole guitar again. So make sure they're in the middle and then you're good to go. So there's some key things when it comes to the nut, which is crucial for the performance of the Floyd Rose system. And one of them, which I touched on earlier, was to make sure that the screws underneath, or on top if you've got top mounting screws, are absolutely tight. You don't want that thing, when you actually stick the locking things down, once you tighten them in, if it's not completely locked in with the screws themselves, it can move and cause a tuning instability. The other one, which is this bar, which I'm sure most people know what it is for, but its main function is to make the strings sit on this nut properly so that it follows the curve of the nut. So you need to put this bar down enough that it finishes there. So hopefully this will show up.
So as I tighten this, it starts pushing down, you can see the string start to move, and you don't want to overdo it because it's pointless and just puts a bit too much tension on it. So you just want to back it off until it starts to lift, which you just see there. So that's fine, and do it on the other side as well, so that you can see. Come on, focus. You'll see the string just sit there. So that's completely flush now, and that's doing the job it needs to do. Because of the dunce that I was, me adjusting these fine tuners meant that I had to go to the ruler because the other one was too thick. So now I am back to parallel with a ruler. So now I'll get it tuned back up, and then I'll do the truss rod check. So the truss rod is a tricky one because you kind of have to know what you want to get out of it rather than just doing random adjustments for the sake of it. So there's a rule that I go by. If you want to do massive bends, string bends, and do a lot of vibrato, and you want to sort of dig into the notes, you want a bit more relief than, say, what a manual will tell you. And if you play, again, this could be utter horseshit, but it's what I've found. If you play very fast and you're not a massively hard player and you can get away with, you know, a light touch, then you can have a flatter fretboard. And I tend to go in the middle. So a lot of the time user manuals and factory specs work quite well for me, except on this, because the user manual says that you could almost get away with an action as low as 0.8 mil on the E string, which is crazy low, with an almost flat fretboard, which for me feels like the strings are literally on the frets, which I don't like, because I like to actually dig in a bit and, you know, play with a bit of power. So I like to get a bit of relief in. So how you check this is you kind of want to take the bridge and the nut height out of the equation. So all you're measuring is the neck from the first to last fret. And what you're checking is in that distance between, it's not actually the last fret, it's the fret where the body joins. So on here, it's 16 or 17, I'll say 17. And you're checking the amount of bow between those two frets. So for me, I don't use a measurement on this, I just kind of know what it looks like. I know that at the 8th fret, now you could use a capo, but if you've got long fingers like me, long hands, you can stretch quite far. So I go by eye and press in to see how close it is to the fret, and I can see there, this is on the low string by the way, I can see there that it's too high off the fret. So I need to tighten the truss rod to bring that gap down. So to tighten the truss rod, I need it to go that way. Loosens that way, tighten that way. So because it was such a small amount, tiny amount, I'll only do maybe 1/8 of a turn that way. It's quite hard because it's already a bit hard. So I get to there, and the thing is with truss rod adjustments, you need to leave it for maybe a minute or two just for everything to kind of settle down. You won't, as much as the adjustment will happen immediately, it might over adjust over the next 10 seconds. It might keep going for a bit, so you just want to give it a minute or so and then check it again. And often you might have gone too far. It's amazing how much of an adjustment that can do. So I'll check it again and see where we are. So that required just an extra little adjustment, and now it's spot on. I know my nut is fine, action-wise, because I haven't touched the frets. And, well, that's not actually always going to be the case, because you can wear the frets down, and so your action might need to be lower at the nut. But I know that it's fine. Again, a good rule of thumb for me is to depress at the 3rd fret and just to do a quick gap test. There's a string in the way there. Gap test here to see. That looks a lot bigger on camera. Again, this has been done before. You can see it there. There's shims underneath this. So I've done it as the hardest I would hit a power chord to get no buzz in an open position, and that was where it was. Same with that, and so forth. And at the higher strings, you can be a little bit more on the edge. So with Floyd Rose systems, you get nuts in loads of different configurations in terms of the actual width of the nut and the radius that it has to match on the neck. Now I can't remember exactly what number this is. I think it's an R9 to get the right string spacing and neck width with the radius of the fretboard, which is I think it's either 15 or 17 inch neck radius. So yeah, you can, and I had to customize a few shims because I wanted this side to be higher than the other side, so there's a lot of half shims in there. A lot of the times you'll get Floyd Rose or just general shims that go all the way across, but you only want to raise one side, so I cut a few of them in half and then bought some other brass 1mm, 2mm, no, not even 1mm, 0.1mm, 0.2mm shims, which I think I actually got from Warwick, the bass company. No, Framers in Germany. So now, to make sure that the bridge is fine, I'll double check the action, and I quite like the low string to be reasonably high. I don't like a low action on the low strings, so I will use my little string gauge measurement. I know that I want about 1.8 to 2 mil at the 12th fret on this. So as you can see, sort of, it's virtually 2, which is fine. On the low string, high string even, where's the 12th fret? There. I want that to be about 1.25, so it needs to come down. So what I'll do, I'll bring the bridge down a bit. Still too high. I'll do this without a camera. Now, ideally, you'd want to take your kind of final measurement for action again in the playing position. I was only doing it as I have done that off camera, and I would say get it most of the way there like that, but get the final measurement in playing position, because if you're set up like this, where the guitar is basically resting here at the body underneath and up here, you're going to get a measurement that isn't right, basically. So yeah, do it in playing position for the actual real measurement. So from there, so I've got the action set. Bridge is still parallel. So just to confirm which order you should be doing this in, once you've got it up to tune, so you do the truss rod first, then you do any nut adjustments, then you do the action, and then you do the intonation. So in that way, each adjustment that you do isn't affecting another one. So if you did the action first, and then the truss rod, obviously at that point you adjusting the truss rod knocks the action out of the set, so you'd have to do the action again. So doing it in truss rod, nut, action, intonation, nothing is undoing any adjustment that you've already done. So now that the truss rod's done, the nut's done, the bar, and the action is set, what you need to do now before you set the intonation, because you'll do the intonation and then we'll take the bar out to do the final bit of the process, you want to stretch the absolute crap out of these strings while the locking nuts aren't on, obviously, to get rid of all the slack, because when this becomes fully locked, you want it to have no slack in the strings, so that's when you'll see tuning problems. So you want to get rid of everything out of these strings. Now it comes time for the intonation. Now I won't be doing this on camera because it will take too long, and also these are virtually in the right place anyway. I just checked it off camera. But what you want to do is, again, in playing position, not like this, unless you have a system where you can completely support the body and neck. If you're having it like this, the body is going to end up being flat, as in the note will be flat to what you tuned it when you had it in playing position. So what you want to do is, on a tuner, is check the 12th fret harmonic. That's your guide, that's your control note. So tune it to get the tuner to be dead on for that, and then press the fret and do the same thing. Now don't overly press it, and if the note is too sharp, which usually tends to be the case, you will want to bring the saddle back. Now if the note is flat, you will want to bring the saddle towards you. Then you want to keep tuning and checking to make sure that your adjustment has had the desired effect. Intonation is quite long-winded if you want to get it absolutely spot on. I would say don't be a "that's good enough, we're nearly there" kind of people. You want it to be there, not "oh, I've done it 3 times, I can't be bothered to do it a 4th." Just do it a 4th time, and you won't have to do it again until you change strings. And if you're changing the same strings, you won't have to do it again then either. So you'll have to do it once, as long as you're not changing tunings and changing string gauges. That's it. When you are making the intonation adjustment, all you'd have to do is loosen off the string you want to change the intonation for, to make it easier to access. Where's my pen? This screw here. I mean, you could maybe move it under normal tuning, but it's tricky to get an Allen key in there. So just loosen it off, make the adjustment, and because this bar's there, the bridge isn't going to move, so you'll be able to come back to the same pitch, and none of these other strings will be affected by it. So when you've done the intonation, you want to just do one final tuning checkup, get it back to perfect pitch, and then you want to reinstall the string clamps and then tighten them up. Again, I'm quite picky with this, so I would tighten them up in playing position rather than in this position, just because the pitch won't be exactly as you tuned it, so you might end up clamping it slightly flat and then it doesn't come back to pitch properly. So tighten these all up, and then we can do the final bit, which is to release this bar and show you the special trick of getting this to return perfectly flat and perfectly in tune.
So now the string clamps are done up, I'm going to take this bar out. I'll bring the camera over. And press the tremolo down. And this will now raise the pitch right up, so the tremolo will be properly down. Let me show you. So you can see there the trem is gone, because the amount of tension on the springs it's gone right down, and the pitch of the strings will be super high and super out of tune. And now, on the back, you will release these screws until your A string has returned to being an A note, and then once that's happened, as long as these go back in a parallel fashion so that it's not, there's not a bigger gap on this side to this side, for example, when you get back to the A, all the other strings should be in tune and the bridge will be flat. And I'll also put this plate back on, because this looks pretty terrible without it on. So for my pickups, I've had many years of experimentation with different pickup heights and pole piece variations and stuff, and I quite like, and I've come to the sort of realization that I quite like the high end to be a high output but not quite as biting, but the low end to be slightly less output but a bit more clarity. So I don't know if you can see this, but my pickup, it's not really picking up very well, pardon the pun. It's slanted, it goes that way, so this side is with the bridge side, so it's like that, and the pole pieces are sort of a staggered height. So you can see the bass side is raised out and the treble side is flush. And I do this by pressing down at the last fret and using a feeler gauge, one of these things, and so I measure it so that this side is 2 mil and this side is 1.4, and then I gradually stagger the height. So it's like 1.4, 1.4, 1.6, 1.6, 1.82. So it's a bit finicky. And the same on this one. Same sort of stagger with the same measurements. And then the middle one is a bit higher. Obviously I can't do anything about the pole pieces. But yeah, that gets me the desired result. So after all that, the guitar is now ready to play. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. Hopefully I explained everything clearly and that I wasn't too confusing with anything. It's the first time I've done like an extended length video like that, so there's been a lot of edits and going back on things that I might have forgot, but that's how this guitar gets its 1 year service, and it's good to play. Cheers guys.